Guys, welcome back to the Bang Your Boy Variety channel. Today's video we're going to be doing is we're going to be discussing a new addition to the currency collection. So on this channel, we took a little bit of break from this, obviously because I haven't got anything really new for the collection. We've done the slow motion Army Men battles videos, that's been wrapped up, and then we shot some guns. So now I'm going to do something with the collection because I got a little, the currency collection because I got a little bit, something new for that. And then I think we're going to move back into a Resistance story after that. So the first thing that I want to be, the new thing that I got for my currency collection is for my paper money specifically. I got another note there, but it's not as interesting, but it'll be shown at the end of the video. The first thing I want to show is the more important note that I got. So, I was playing a game. My partner walks in. He says, "You want to check out this $50 bill?" So I was playing a game. Wasn't thinking about it. I thought it was just going to be, another one of these. An 80s or 90s 50. Because I saw this design. Looked at it real quick. And I saw, this is a 50 here, I saw this here, the redemption clause was longer. It is a resemblance of the notes printed in the series of 1950. So, well, this is a series 1950, so I'm going to have to be taking that. So I bought it off him for face value. So basically a trade is what I did. So this is a neat little collection. Neat little item that came to the collection. It's a rare, once-in-a-lifetime find for me. Specifically, personally experiencing. Personal experience. It's a once-in-a-lifetime find. So this, specifically, is a Series 1950D Federal Reserve note. $50 note. So, first thing we're going to dive into with this is obviously the background. We obviously know Federal Reserve notes are the notes that we use today. And this is what they looked like from the series of 1963A $50 bills all the way up into the series of 1993 or 95 before changing with the series of 1996. And then they changed into this 50 here. And then they change into the colorful pink, sort of pinkish colored $50 bills that we see today without the oval portrait frame around President Grant. So this is what it looks like even before this. And I may not be able to tell the difference between the two without looking a little bit closer. So we're going to go over the differences here that you can observe by looking at them closer. So I'm looking at these two here. We can see the first main difference that I used to classify the series 1928, 1934, 1950, and then 63 or 63A through 93 or 95 is by the redemption clause length. So this is the standard redemption clause length that we see today on notes. So it started on this note from the series of 1963A, and it has been the same since then, and appears on our currency today. It reads, "This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private." So just your basic redemption clause, not redeemable. It used to be known as a redemption clause. It's just a clause there. I'm going to use some information on what this note can be used for. So this note is the lowest of the low, basically. It's nothing like what you could use it for back in history. $50, spend it when you need $50 for something, or just spend it as you need. It is for public use, paying debts in cash, and for private use. So that's what this is for. This is not redeemable in anything. It's not backed by any precious metals. It's just $50, piece of paper, piece of fabric made out of linen and cotton, worth $50. Now, obviously, this was worth a lot more back in its time than it was now, but the redemption clause is shorter there. So that's the first differences. And we see this redemption clause here, which is just a tad bit longer. And this is how I knew that this was a Series 1950 at first, by looking at that. This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private, and is redeemable in lawful money, the United States Treasury, or at any Federal Reserve Bank. So, interpreting that, this note was still redeemable with this series. Now, we were moving out of the redeeming money for stuff era, so this is pretty much the last of that. The silver certificates that I have were redeemable in silver coins, and this says just in lawful money. So this could be exchanged at any Federal Reserve Bank, not just the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland, which is where this was printed at, or represented at. It was printed in Washington, D.C., but I believe, yeah. But it represents the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland, Ohio, which is D, and the A through L, and it's number 4 of 12 of the 12 Federal Reserve Banks. So, that's that. The first difference that you can tell. The next difference is, if you read this underneath here, United States of America, $50. And then if you read this on the 1950 note, United States of America, and it still says will pay to the bearer on demand. So that has been on currency from, the 1800s up until this series here. So this was the last series to say that of Federal Reserve notes. Will pay under the bearer on demand, $50. So this still could be redeemed. And it is the series, and that's the second difference. And the next difference is on the back, but I still got a thing to explain to on the front here. So this is the series 1950D, as you can see with the D letter there. So what that means is there was series 1950, 1950A, all the way up to 1950E. So 1950D is the second to last in this series of 1950s notes. So the next one, which would be the last one, would be 1950E. So when it says series and then a date and then whatever, if it has a letter, that does not mean that was printed in that year. This was not printed in 1950. It was actually rather printed about a decade later, or a little over a decade later. And its signature combinations are Granahan and Dillon. So those are the last names of the Secretary of the Treasury and the Treasurer of the United States at that time period. Every time a new treasurer or a Secretary of Treasury comes into office, doesn't matter if both or one change, they change the series, either to a whole new date or they go up a letter from A to B or C to D or whatever, and it usually only goes up to E or F. That's usually the highest is F. And then, after F, they switch to a new series and they make a couple small changes. So that's what occurs with this. So for the signatures of Granahan and Dillon, and for the series of 1950D, these were printed between the years 1963 and 1965. So in between that time period, it could have been printed in 63, could have been printed in 64 and 65, any month in those years. So it's not determinable what exact date this was printed, but within those time periods. So that narrows it down a little bit. From our printage amounts, for the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland, 2,880,000 were printed for that bank. That doesn't seem like a lot compared to the amounts that are printed today, but these are not very expensive notes. Usually in the condition that the example I just showed you was, which is about very fine, in between very fine and extremely fine, that's going to bring about $60 to $80. I don't know. There's values different for everything, but that's what thing shows over there. So probably not too much over face value. Is just what we're going to put it at. So that's that. I checked the serial numbers. They match. Nothing fancy in the serial number. And that's that. So, flipping over to the back here. Got the standard view of the Capitol, reminiscent of this era for the series in 1928 all the way up to the series in 1995. But one small difference. You can see the motto "In God We Trust" was added to the start. Was added to the series in 1963A, and it's been on the 50 ever since. This was the series. It was still not added here then. So we can see now, and my partner examined this with a magnifying glass, that there appears to be more buildings on the Series 1950D one than there is on the Series 1985 one. So I never noticed that, but that's just something to point out. Also, another thing you can point out is as you get older with currency, the green gets richer on the back. You'll see much richer green color in the 1950D than on the 1985. So, back to the thing with the series and the letters. Since this says series 1985 with no letter only, that means it's a little more closer to the date that it says on there. As you get further up in the letters, that's when you get farther from the date. So I'm just going to pull up the years that this was printed here, series 1985, and there were no letters for the series 1985. It just was series 1985, and then it ended and went to the series 1988. And actually, this design only went up to the series 1993. And this is also the Federal Reserve Bank in Cleveland. So series 1985 was printed from 1985 to 1988. So a little closer to the years, obviously, there. That's going to be it for that. And the other thing I wanted to show you is the other part that goes to my collection. I will show you where these 50s go in my album, what they look like, and their places. So trying to find one of those 1985 $50 bills, even since they're not printed anymore, they're just completely flooded out by the new notes, and they're almost impossible to find. But finding a series 1950 anywhere from that's like once in a lifetime. So I mean, I consider that quite lucky. I wasn't even the one who found it, but just thinking about that, it's not very common. So it's going to go right here above this. We have somewhat assembled a typeset here. I would need a more modern 50. I don't have that, but I do have this. And the other note I got was this $20 bill from the series 1996. I did not have one that was in between this one and this one, so I took that out. And these are really hard to find, even harder than the $10 bills. Those are still prevalent. You still run across these sometimes, but I've been having a much harder time. Even the $1 bills, even though they look the same as each other. I do have a series 1995 $1 bill in here somewhere. Somewhere in here. But anyway, yeah, there. They look the same because it hasn't changed, but those are even harder to find anything earlier than 2006. Yeah, so we assembled typeset there. So that's a little nice. And then all I really need for the middle notes is the 100, but you know, those are even more prevalent, but they're expensive to trade for. So that's gonna be it for today's video, guys. So please like and subscribe, so it helps out the Vanderbilt Board Writing channel. That's gonna be it for today's video, and please stay tuned for things we're gonna be doing with Resistance Story and other things we're gonna be moving on to with the channel.